It's so painful at the moment. Chelsea Football Club are in total and utter disarray. And for one reason or another, people do not want to talk about the main issues that are systemically ruining this football club. There are some very obvious issues with the club that aren't being highlighted, they aren't being discussed, and I think we need to try and understand why. So, in this video, I'm going to try and unravel why Chelsea are completely ruined. I'm going to try and shed some insight and give you my thoughts onto why it is going so wrong for Chelsea and why we are a shadow of the former club that we once were. We are incomparable to the brilliant club that we were for all my lifetime. And Todd Boehly and Clearlake have come into a club and they have totally disassembled the entire structure of what was once a great footballing institution in, a couple of years. It's appalling. And there are certain things that aren't being discussed that I think should be discussed, and I'm going to try and highlight them. For example, on this video, I will be discussing how distinctly average Enzo Fernandez is. I want to have a conversation. I want your thoughts on what exactly you think of Moises Caicedo. I want you to help me try and shed some insight into quite how fast a footballer you have to be for your technique to be totally irrelevant. For example, Mykhailo Mudryk. And there is a crucial one here. Mauricio Pochettino. Listen, Mauricio Pochettino is getting away with it. This isn't me suggesting for 1 second that I want him out. This isn't me suggesting for 1 second that I think we could do any better than Mauricio Pochettino. But this is acknowledging the fact that he is getting so much wrong and he is getting away with it. And again, I will ask, why? Why is there not a conversation around it? And I think the industry that I work in, I'm a YouTuber. I think that YouTubers are often derided, aren't we? We're often laughed at and we're seen in quite a cynical way. And I think this is an example of where the power of YouTube is so important because I can say what I want. I don't need to carry favour with the club. I don't need the Chelsea press officer or the Chelsea comms officer to approve of me, to give me a right to ask a question from Pochettino. I don't need the tacit approval of the players. I can say exactly what I want. I can tell you the truth and I can tell you the way that I see it. Whereas nobody in mainstream journalism is flagging Enzo Fernandez being appalling. It's just not out there. It's not a conversation. Nobody is flagging quite how wrong Mauricio Pochettino is getting it. And I haven't seen anybody suggesting that Todd Boehly should be forced to sell the club. People will say, he's got to be there for 10 years. It's appalling what he has done. There should be Boehly out protests on the Fulham Road. And yet again, that is the kind of thing that isn't really getting any coverage. So, of course, we were battered by Manchester United, embarrassed by Manchester United. The fact that the game finished 2-1 flattered us hugely. When you think about the significance of Manchester United beating us, you think about the clubs that have gone there and won. You think about the week that they've had. You think about what's been going on. And yet, they look like Ferguson's treble winners when they play us. So, let's try and work out why. And the first place to start is Pochettino. Pochettino is at fault partly for this. Pochettino is the manager. The buck stops with him. He is responsible. He has to take his share of the responsibility. He has to take his share of the burden. And people don't want to talk about it, but he is not an elite level manager. He's a decent manager. I don't think we could do any better than him. I don't want him sacked. But he's not a very good manager. He's not. This isn't my opinion. This is a fact. This is his track record. Apparently, that Tottenham team were the best team over 2 years, the best team over 2 calendar years, and yet they won nothing. They won nothing because Pochettino isn't a winning manager. He can steady the ship and he can certainly bring some qualities, but he is getting an awful lot wrong. And look, the reason why Chelsea aren't succeeding isn't him. On some level, I believe that he's set up to fail, but he must do better. He must elevate Chelsea from where we are. There is no way that this collection of players with a better manager would be languishing practically in the bottom half of the league table. I don't like these players. I genuinely don't. It's a horrible state of affairs. I don't know who you support, but let's pretend that you're a Liverpool fan. I imagine that you idolise many members of your team. If you're an Arsenal fan, I imagine that already you've fallen in love with Declan Rice. Already. You could count on one hand and have fingers to spare how many of these Chelsea players I love. They're just so average. It feels like so many of them are mercenaries. But there are some good players there, and there is no way that we should be where we are in the league. So Pochettino has to take his responsibility for that. And if you look at the way that he's setting up the team, he's getting so much wrong. Like, you think about the back four that played at Old Trafford. Like, how on earth does that make any sense? You've got Cucurella at right back. You've got Colwill at left back. You've got James on the bench. Like, that just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And you're going to really struggle to win games when that's going on. And then you think about our midfield, right? So, I love Thiago Silva. Again, I think he's one of the best things about the club, but he's struggling, really struggling. And when you think about the protection that he's been given, you've got a sort of pairing of Caicedo and Fernandes. I mean, that's £250 million. It's £250 million. I don't think either of them are better than John McGinn. But if we had bought John McGinn, our support would have gone mad. Of course we don't want McGinn. We want Enzo Fernandez. Enzo Fernandez is better. He's not better than McGinn. He's not. Like, I was working with Flex the other day. He really made me laugh. He was talking about Enzo Fernandez. He called him John Joe Shelby. It's extreme. It's extreme and it's inaccurate. But it's comedic. And the reason it's comedic is because there is quite a lot of truth said in jest. And when you think about Caicedo and Fernandes being worth £250 million, it gives you an insight into how poorly the club is run, how the structure is so poorly run. Like, of course, those two players can't dictate the tempo of a game at Old Trafford. Like they're two kids to start with. So we're throwing them in the deep end where they don't really deserve to be thrown in the deep end. And in terms of the data, in terms of what they've proved in the game, Enzo Fernandez, I'm sure that people will tell me how brilliant he was in the Portuguese league or whatever else. But I'd never heard of him until I went to the World Cup in Qatar this time last year. I'd never heard of him. Moises Caicedo played what? 40 games? And suddenly they're £250 million. How thick do you have to be? Do you know what £100 million player looks like? Looks like Declan Rice. When you think about what Declan Rice does for Arsenal, does everything. Right, last minute win. He wasn't bought to score last minute winners. Scored 2 already. But you think about what he does in a game, and you think about his track record. You look at the longevity. You look at what he achieved, and you look at for how long he's done it. That is therefore, quite obviously, a £100 million player. But Chelsea don't want to sign Declan Rice because he doesn't fit our model because he's too old. Chelsea want to sign players who will grow and will have a big sell-on value and will develop and whatever else. If you want to improve Chelsea, if Chelsea spent £1 billion, £1 billion, and I was to say to you that we're going to spend £1 billion, but our centre forward, if you play the game, hypothetically, I give you £1 billion. Who are the players? Who lines up for Chelsea as a number 9? Probably you spend £1 billion, you're going to spend over 100 on the centre forward. It's the most important and most expensive. Osherman, Kane, Tony at a push. Nicholas Jackson, 30 million. Strategy, foresight, intelligence in the boardroom. Nicholas Jackson, a geezer that wasn't even in the Senegal squad until Mane had to pull out. A geezer that had a bit of a purple patch at Villarreal towards the end of the season. £30 million. How can that be the case? How can we get it so wrong? And there are so many passengers in the team. Enzo Fernandez is a passenger. Like, genuinely, been at the club a year now, right? How many good games has he had? You count it on one hand and you have fingers to spare. Like, what's he good at? He's a passenger. Can't really run. Can't really shoot. Can't really score. Can't really assist. His passing is fine but average. What's he good at? And genuinely tell me, how many good games has he had for Chelsea? Like, think about the midfielders that we've been blessed with watching over the years. Think about the best that you've seen. Michael Essien, John Obi Mikel, the king that is Frank Lampard, Michael Ballack. I mean, where do you draw the line here? Claude Makelele, taking games by the scruff of the neck. And do you know why? Because they weren't children. 28-year-old winners, proven winners, track record of winning. A sample size of being brilliant. Declan Rice. If you want to sign a creative player, go and sign James Maddison, don't you? We didn't want James Maddison. We could have got him. He was our player, but we didn't want him because he didn't fit our model. He was too old. Again, idiotic. There are more, by the way. There's more. Like, even the ones that have worked have been lucky. Like Cole Palmer. The only reason that Chelsea scored the other night, most games in fact, is because Cole Palmer is a sensational footballer. A sensational footballer. Truly brilliant. I love the boy. We didn't want him. Todd Bowley, Clearlake, the Vision, the sporting director, the club did not want Cole Palmer. They got lumbered with Cole Palmer because they wanted Elise. Elise didn't want them. And fair play to Elise, by the way. Elise didn't want them. Emile Smith-Rowe, Arsenal wouldn't do it. So we ended up with Cole Palmer. We actually drew the short straw at the time. The club felt like that. Cole Palmer has lucked out. We have got a bit lucky there and it's worked. But realistically, we are now inching towards, I don't know what, the abyss. It feels like we're going towards the abyss. Newcastle are going to launch us out the cup. Our season is over. Our season ended at St James's Park. You know, I genuinely believe that there was something going on as well. So wrong. I got it so wrong. But I honestly believed that things were going okay and there was a chance. And it was because it's what I wanted to see, you know. We beat Tottenham, didn't we? We battered Tottenham. And I get incredibly carried away by that. You know, it's always the highlight of my year whenever we beat Tottenham, particularly away from home. And we then got that draw against Manchester City, which I think was valiant and deserved credit. And I managed to convince myself off the back of those two games that there was something going on, and if we're lucky with the cup draws, we could end up at Wembley and we could qualify for Europe. And if a few teams struggle and it ends up going to fifth, the Champions League could be on the horizon. And I think I saw what I wanted to see. I was desperate for it to be true. But the season is over. Like, we have nothing. We are a collection of players without any sort of fight, totally disjointed, a manager who is uninspiring, I'll say, a club who don't know what direction they're going in, and a sporting director who is insane. So who are we? What are we doing? Where are we going? You know, how can you possibly think? How can you rationalise Chelsea needing a goalkeeper and you go and sign the third choice keeper out of Brighton? I don't think he played badly the other night, by the way. But there's a principle, isn't there? There is a principle. So I think that we need wholesale, drastic change. I would like there to be protests on the Fulham Road, just like I was with the Super League. If anything like that happened, I'd be there immediately. And the thing I find most frustrating is people who I respect, people, you know, journalists who I think have a huge platform and can almost dictate the narrative. Why are they not asking questions about what's going on at Chelsea? Like the shake-up of this club, it deserves conversation. And I think there should be a conversation around Pochettino and certain players. But surely, even if you were just into football, Chelsea Football Club on the landscape and within the pantheon of great football clubs, Chelsea Football Club are a precious commodity. And they should be preserved. And someone has come in and totally eroded it. Like, this isn't, I know football rivalry will always dictate how people feel about this. But you know, venture capitalists coming into a club and totally dismantling it, that can't be good for anyone. Even if you're a Tottenham fan, you can't enjoy it. Here I do. Season over early December, first week of December. That's got to be a new record, isn't it? For when you can actually say that the season is over for Chelsea. Thank you so much for watching. Really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know. Cheers.